Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Edmonds. I hope that you and those closest to you are managing to stay safe and well, what is a very trying time for us all. I'd like to welcome you to this NGA webinar on virtual governance and governing through the coronavirus. As you know, NGA runs many events throughout the year for its members, and for some time we've been planning to run a series of webinars on a range of governing topics. But our priority right now is to ensure that you as governing boards have the clarity, the confidence and the information and guidance that you need to continue your urgent business at a time when it's not possible for us all to be in the room at the same time together. So that's why we felt it was really important to put this webinar on today, and I'm very glad that you've joined us for it. So I'm just about to switch to my next slide, if you just bear with me for a moment. Thank you, sorry for that. So the purpose of the webinar, as I said, is just to provide you with some practical advice and some suggestions to help you adjust to those new priorities and ways of working. And the way I want to do that really is by giving you some key messages that you'll find in some guidance on business continuity and holding virtual meetings that we published at the beginning of this week. And that guidance will be updated as we learn more ourselves about the challenges that we're facing and how to overcome them with the best possible practice. But for now, that we felt it was important to put something out which covered urgent decision making and the approach that you can take to holding virtual meetings. We also felt it was really important that you had access as governing boards to advice on any individual situations that you might find yourself in, you know, whether that's clarification of urgent decisions, how they can be taken, whether that is where you stand in a recruitment process or a panel process, or even something like the ongoing recruitment of governors and the election of governors during a period that schools are closed to almost all pupils. And for that reason, we've opened up our Goldline advice service to governing boards, to all governing boards. Normally, that's a service that's available to governing boards that have gold membership of NGA, but we felt that it was really important at this time that you had that support on the ground and that on-the-spot advice to help you through any individual situations that you might have. So if I don't cover something in detail this afternoon during my time with you, then fear not. You can reach our Goldline advice team and they will help you through that situation. So moving on, I'd like to start really by just focusing on what the priorities are for school leaders at this time before we move on to covering business continuity and virtual meetings, because at this time, as we all know, everything is secondary to maintaining provision for those pupils who need that provision and need it right now. And those are our vulnerable children and the children of those workers who are critical to the COVID-19 response, you know, particularly our colleagues in the NHS who are doing such a wonderful job at this moment in time, as are our school leaders who are working so tremendously hard with parents, families and local authorities to deliver the services that are needed on the ground, both in and out of school, at the same time as making almost daily decisions about staffing and school capacity to ensure that those services are maintained, whilst giving consideration to the children who are currently at home and the activities and education that they need to ensure that level of continuity. Now, this is an enormous and mammoth operational task. And whilst it is operational predominantly, those of us who govern want to do our very best to support our school leaders in the tasks that they have in front of them. And following the Department for Education advice, which we'll share with you after this webinar along with the guidance, we need to do that in a proportionate and considerate way that doesn't inhibit them in the tasks that they have. But that's not to say that school governance is suspended during this period. What it does mean is that our priorities have shifted to these really important issues. So we're having to focus on how we can keep governing board business going, but not as we know it normally. And I'm a chair of a governing board myself, so I've gone through this experience like you have last week, when we could see that decision to close schools to almost all pupils coming. We could see that was going to happen very soon, and we could also see the fact that we would be restricted in our own movement and our own normal way of life. So with that in mind, it was important for me as a chair, as I'm sure it is to you as well, to maintain contact with my colleagues on the governing board, with the head teacher, the clerk, to give those supportive messages, to see how everyone is, to see if their individual circumstances allow them to focus on governance at this time, because we shouldn't take that for granted. And then to have those discussions about how we might maintain business during this period. And from my experience, what I can say about that is that we decided as a governing board that it wasn't necessary to hold an emergency meeting of any sort once we'd had a status report from the head teacher about how things were working on the ground. We felt that it was more appropriate to hold our meeting that we had scheduled for the end of next month, and to stay in touch in between. We also had a conversation about what business we could put on hold, and then think about how we were going to meet, and we decided quite quickly that we would hold a video conference on that meeting date, and that we would restrict our agenda. Actually, what we're doing is following the NGA advice that it's sensible to suspend business at this time and focus really on the agenda on two essential things. And here they are. First of all, the business critical decisions, the decisions that can't be delayed, and they may well relate to the budget, to important appointments, appointments even to the board that ensure that the board can continue to function because it has the requisite number of members, decisions to do with school structure. Those things will, you will know those decisions when you see them, and you will base them on your individual circumstances. But really, those should be the things that those should be decisions that you're taking, and anything else should be effectively parked for the time being. And that gives us as a board the time and the headspace to monitor and consider how the school is providing care for those children who need care at this moment in time, and unpick any issues that may well have resulted as a consequence of the school providing limited provision. And what I mean by that are any issues arising, such as additional costs which have an impact on our budget, issues around the premises and the arrangements from staff, many of whom will now be working from home. Is that possible? How's that working on the ground? What support, what advice, what guidance can we provide as a governing board to help make our school leaders' life that much easier during a very testing time? And we're also, because it's fundamentally our role, isn't it, to ensure the well-being and welfare of pupils, we'll also want to make sure that their well-being and welfare is being considered at all times, and that we will consider those issues as a governing board as well. And that brings me back to a point, actually, because I know that many of you have been in touch with NGA about those issues, about sufficiency of places, about the impact on the welfare and well-being of pupils. And although this webinar is covering business continuity for boards, I just want you to know that NGA is mindful of all those issues. We are taking on board any feedback you care to give us and seeking clarity where clarity is needed on your behalf. So whilst we're not covering that specifically today, I realise that it's very important to many of you who have joined this webinar, and you should know that NGA is on hand to consider any of those issues with you that you may have. But those things really are all that matter for us as governing board. So what we're advising and we recommend is that you adjust your agendas accordingly and focus on those key issues. We've been asked a lot, as you would expect, about the recruitment of school leaders, and panel hearings and meetings that were scheduled or ongoing at the point that schools were closed to almost all pupils, and the disruptive effect that that has had. We're acutely aware that the Easter period is typically a busy time for the recruitment of school leaders, and that the national resignation dates mean that any disruption to the process at this point isn't helpful at all. Now, again, there is not one single response to this challenge. It will all depend on your local circumstances, and we recommend very much that if you are in that position, that you are recruiting a senior leader and that's ground to a halt, and it's not possible to complete the process by video conference, then the board really needs to start communicating amongst itself about the contingency arrangements that need to be made, and if necessary, engaging others in that process, like the local authority or your local schools network, to ensure that you have that leadership capacity that you need at the beginning of the autumn term, if indeed that's required. So that may well require you, for example, to revisit resignation dates, to extend interim arrangements, so on and so forth, depending on what your actual situation is. With regard to complaints, exclusions and other hearings, well, they're on hold, aren't they? I think that's pretty clear. It's not helpful. We understand that, and the best we can do really at this time is communicate between those concerned, just to keep them informed and feeling less anxious about the situation. And of course, in the case of exclusions, where it's an expectation that you'll provide work for pupils while that process is ongoing, continue to do that as the school normally would. So that's recruitment and panels and the current situation there. Now, moving on to virtual meetings, the public health advice means that we have to embrace virtual meetings and make them work for us if we're to maintain contact in our professional lives, but more importantly, with the people who are closest to us, who don't live with us, and we can't go around and see at the moment. So we're all getting to grips with these platforms that perhaps have not been familiar with us before, but enable us to stay in touch, and governing boards are no different. Now, the Department for Education advice is pretty clear that governing boards can agree to hold meetings by alternative means without having to meet first to agree those alternative means. So if you're a governing board like the one I serve on, that was very much used to meeting every half term face to face, and had never contemplated the scenario of meeting by telephone or video conference before, that's not an issue. Those arrangements can be made just by making contact with each other, agreeing arrangements and the protocol for doing so. And actually, our guidance does include an example protocol, a simple protocol to ensure those meetings are safe and secure, which you can just almost adopt instantly as a basis to proceed. Now, when it comes to agreeing how you meet virtually, you have numerous options, telephone or video conference, and you'll also have experience undoubtedly on the board and within the school that will help inform what works best for your board. So again, if I go back to my own example, when I canvassed opinion on our governing board, it became very clear very quickly that we were all using and getting to grips with Microsoft Teams. NGA as an organisation has been working, a whole organisation has been working remotely for over a week now, and we have been making very good use of Microsoft Teams and learning about what that can do for us. And I found that other people I work with on the governing board were using that application as well. So that was the one we chose. Now you may have a different experience and may find that your colleagues are, have embraced Skype or Google Teams or Zoom or some other platform, and that's fine. It's just finding what works best for you. Where the licensing and the technology or the technical expertise rests. Those initial conversations are also a good opportunity to find out if there are any issues amongst boards members, because there may well be issues with internet connectivity, certainly at this time, that you'll want to unpick and make contingencies for. And also, it stands to reason that some of us are more technically confident than others. So there'll be one or two members of the board who will perhaps require a little bit of extra support from the clerk or the chair or someone in a good position to provide that support to help them get to grips and embrace this new way of working. So don't forget to be inclusive and give support to those who need it. I should also say at this point that NGA recommends that virtual meetings are the way to go, rather than trying to conduct and carry out your business or hold meetings by email correspondence. That can create real problems, especially for the clerk. So we would counsel against you doing that, really. My own personal recommendation is that boards opt for video conferencing over dialing in to meetings and holding telephone meetings. I've had experience of both recently, and I would say that it's both helpful and indeed comforting to see your colleagues by video conference, and to have that effect that it does on the meeting dynamic. But again, you're better placed than I to decide which of your arrangements will work best for you. Which brings me on to a poll that I'd like to conduct. Really, this is your opportunity to engage in the webinar and share with us which of those methods you'll be using so that you'll be able to continue to meet during this period of isolation. So what I'd like you to do, what I'm going to do now, is launch this poll, and as you can see, we have 5 options on the screen there as to which you are likely to use or are using to ensure your continuity of board business. And whilst the seconds tick by and you're responding to that, and I can see that you're doing that, thank you very much. I should also mention a couple of things. One is that NGA's next contribution to this will probably be in the form of some information sheets giving general advice on how to make best use of these various platforms. We've really got to sort of get up to speed with our own technical knowledge, but we'll do our best to make that contribution. And also, it's heartening to see that some of these platforms like Zoom are recognising the situation and are making those platforms free for schools to use. So it's perhaps no surprise as I close the poll now, and most of you have voted in that, thank you very much, to see that you are mostly using web-based video conferencing to continue your meetings virtually. That's good to see. for the 4% of you who have responded and saying that the board is not equipped to meet by telephone or video conference. Obviously, I'm not placed to unpick your particular issues here and now, but I'm more than welcome, either personally or through NGA Advice Goldline, to have that conversation with you about how we might overcome that challenge or any challenges you're facing at this moment in time. We're all in this together, you know, as a society and as a governing community, and I think it's really important that we do our best to help those out who need helping at this moment in time. So if you do have concerns about how equipped the board is to deal with this at this moment in time, and you think you could sort of benefit from some advice, then please take advantage of that. It would be good to hear, and also good to hear from you as well if you're using these applications on a trial and error basis, even to tell us what you've learned and what works well, and share that learning. But regardless of the type of application that you're using, as I move to my next screen, so I'm just going to jump back a little because my screen's. Thank you. Thanks for bearing with me there. So regardless of the platform that you are using, I think there are some real basics that hold us in good stead for holding virtual meetings. And I'm sure many of you have had this experience already. So you know just how useful it is to test the platform in advance. So even if that's one or two of you going online or onto the telephone line just to see how the sound quality is working, to see that you've got the vision, the visual contact that you need, and also that you're able to move paperwork and reports around if indeed that's something you need to refer to. The practicalities and the logistics, always good to have a bit of a practice. I've done 2 or 3 practices at this webinar that I'm delivering at this moment in time. You may think actually that I probably need a little bit more practice, but nevertheless, I found it valuable, and it follows that you'll benefit from testing those platforms yourself before you use them, and also thinking about the fact that meetings aren't going to be the same. They're not going to feel the same. So let's not try to replicate what you would normally do, at least to begin with, until you become more confident. So the chair and the clerk working together to get those agendas nice and clear and succinct, and any paperwork that is presented scaled down, both bearing in mind the workload implications for our leaders, but also the fact that it's not easy to navigate a lot of paperwork in a virtual meeting unless you're well practiced, and that's the feedback that we've had as well. But perhaps most of all, it's useful to set the ground rules in advance with the participants. Now, this is different to the protocol that I referred to a little earlier, which is all about ensuring that the meetings are held in a safe and secure environment, so that individuals are signing in from a location where they're not being listened in on, for example, and that the platforms they're using are relatively safe and secure and adhere to IT policies. That's really important to have that standard protocol. But I'm referring now to the ground rules, the things that make virtual meetings work really well, and we refer to these in our guidance as well. And they may seem obvious to you, but they're just worth going over. First of all, the importance of joining the meeting on time. I would actually say joining the meeting slightly early, just because you don't have the pressure of a commute to the meeting location. Don't be so laid back about that you join the meeting the second it's due to start, because that can have quite a disruptive effect, particularly if the if the platform's new and you're getting used to it. So joining good times, great to say hello and just see that everyone's doing well at this time. I think, you know, we just need that interaction anyway, don't we? It's good for the soul and our mental health, particularly at time when things are challenging. Think about how the role that the clerk has in ensuring that the formalities of signing in are adhered to, and that, you know, will require some kind of digital signing in sheet. Sticking to the agenda is important because, again, you're not in the same room, so reading the body language and the signals is that little bit harder to get used to, and it's even harder if you go off track and deviate into different you know, discussion threads, however useful they may be. So try, you know, you've got an agenda, stick to it. That's generally regarded to be good meeting practice. Saying your name before speaking or raising your hand, I think is helpful. You know, particularly if you're viewing a screen with, you know, lots of faces on, and you could be a little bit discombobulating to begin with. So you know, just to keep that natural order of things and to ensure that continuity and everybody gets the opportunity to contribute, and you're not sort of cutting across each other. Just that basic convention will help. You probably won't be surprised if I say this, but I'll say it anyway. Using the webcam is really recommended because it does make the meeting that much more engaging and helps you focus. I had an experience, as I mentioned earlier, where I dialed into a meeting that lasted for over 2 hours this week, where a lot of sort of intense business was discussed, and I found that really, really difficult. In fact, I'll admit to you now, the 100 or so of you who are listening, that at one point I did get up and wander off and do other things because I just couldn't bear it. So I had to, you know, I had to take a short break. So use the webcam and the mute button as well to minimize those background noises. You know, we're all at home now. We're all navigating around others. You can't stop the dog barking. We can't stop other noises in the house. So use the mute button to ensure they don't sort of impede on the meetings. And also, you know, just give yourself a bit of additional time and breathing space as well to refer to documents that you may have open in another application. Again, my experience this last couple of weeks is when I've not had ready access to a printer has meant that I've had an iPad open and you know, supplementary notes, and then an application I've had to go into, and it's not easy really, particularly if things don't happen in the order that you expect. So give yourself some additional time for that, and then the meeting will flow as it normally does. There's a bit of trial and error involved here, but once you get to grips with it, I think it will have a, you know, profound and positive effect on the way we govern in the future. In fact, we'll probably not relinquish you know, virtual meetings to go back to conventional face-to-face. We'll probably achieve a balance of the two, and therefore ensuring even better business continuity long term. So in terms of closing comments, it really is that. Don't be deterred by the things that don't work perfectly first time around. It is that there is a bit of trial and error involved. Keep talking to each other, discuss what's worked well and what could work better in those remote meetings, and continue to share your experience with us. We're humbled by your dedication and commitment to the role at a time when there is such strain and emotional pressure on everyone. So the fact that you're focused on your governing role and your governing business, and you're willing to share with us, is very humbling and very much appreciated. So do keep letting us know what's working well and not so well for you, and we'll do our best to disseminate that learning to others. And of course, throughout this period and beyond, we'll continue to work and support you. We'll be updating our guidance on business continuity and other issues relating to policy and education and the coronavirus. I mentioned that Goldline's available for you to tap into if you need a second opinion or some advice. We'll keep these webinars and podcasts going, maybe on this topic as we learn more, but also on other topics too. And look out for our other education, our other information outlets like our weekly newsletter which will continue business as usual. And a final mention, although these perhaps might, governor development might not be at the forefront of our thinking at the moment, everything we do is learning, and perhaps at this time, more than anything, more than any other time, the benefits of learning remotely and having that flexible option to develop our skills and knowledge really comes to the fore. And we're very proud of our Learning Link provision, our Learning Link offer. It's affordable, it's flexible, it's growing in content and range all the time, and it really is a good option for governing boards who want that something else alternative just to face-to-face training, for any reason. So, do bear that in mind as well. So it's been an absolute pleasure to deliver this webinar, the first of many, I hope, for NGA. I hope that it's been useful. I hope that it's come across well, and I look forward to hearing from you soon, and we look forward to receiving your feedback on the webinar, but also what you would like us to do in the future in terms of advice and guidance to help you through this difficult period. So I'm just going to say goodbye, really, by confirming that, that you let us know what information and support you need at this time, and do complete the survey that we send you after the webinar. But more than anything, to just remind you to stay healthy, remember your priorities, and look after those, be kind to yourself and look after those who are closest to you. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I look forward to speaking to you again. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.